Simon, I don't know what your take is on this, and there's a bit of a dilemma involved regarding it. A full-scale Premier League social media boycott is being considered for this weekend in the wake, of course, of rising abuse. But, of course, here's the dilemma. Clubs' commercial agreements are making the situation that bit more complex. So what should come first, commercial or moral stances? Now, of course, we've seen what happened last week. Swansea led the way, followed by Birmingham City, followed by Rangers up in Glasgow.
Thierry Henry led the way.
And Thierry Henry led the way before the three clubs. But then we thought, right, one of the big boys is going to come in, one of the Premier League, but they haven't. But now we hear all of them could come in this weekend. Is that what is needed? I'm delighted to say the PFA's Deputy Chief Executive, Bobby Barnes, joins us live on the show. Bobby, good morning to you.
Morning, Jim. Morning, Simon. Simon, good to see you in the gym, mate.
Barnesy, don't worry about things like that. I'm as fit as a fiddle.
But Bobby, I think we should tell the nation that when you and I spoke earlier this morning, you sounded as if you were indeed on a treadmill, literally, were you?
I was indeed, yeah. I've been keeping up all the way through lockdown, but a bit of an anomaly, actually, because I think I joined the rest of the country in supporting my local hostelry last night as well. So I was doing my bit for the economy as well.
Good man. Bobby, what are we likely to see? What are you hearing? And would it be what is needed? In other words, a full-scale Premier League social media boycott?
Well, I think the one thing that we have to bear in mind is that the Premier League has a tremendous reach and a tremendous voice. And without doubt, what we've seen in recent weeks is that there has been a bit of an uptick in terms of the cases that we're actually seeing. Now, we're all engaging. We've got the government with the online harm bill on its way. We're all having round table meetings. We're all urging the social media companies to actually take the appropriate action. And frankly, we seem to be coming up against a brick wall. And I think unless there's actually a real message that sends out a real message of intent and the strength of feeling from the game as a whole, then I think we're going to have a problem, because these guys are only going to be influenced, I believe, by when it actually starts to hit them, both in the conduct of their business and, more importantly, in their pockets.
Yes. And Simon, Bobby's nailed it. I mean, there is the inherent dilemma. What should come first, commercial or moral stance?
Well, yes. I mean, ultimately, you have to make sacrifices, don't you? If the cause is so valid and so well felt by the participants that are suffering from this abuse, then there has to be a mentality of saying, right, well, it's all well and good saying I hate it and I abhor it. That's lip service. Now you have to throw yourself in the middle of it and say, okay, I have to consequence myself to be able to achieve something, and in part, by doing this, you're creating a media pressure that builds and builds and builds. Bobby, you made a statement earlier on about increasing. Do you actually think that it's increasing, or do you think that the focus on it and the barrier to entry in terms of people's tolerance of it has dramatically decreased? So hence the reasons why the exposure and the awareness of it is getting greater.
Well, that's a good question, Simon. And to be honest, there's two elements to that. Without doubt, there is very much an atmosphere now of players have said, to quote our campaign a little while ago, enough, if you like, and they're not prepared to accept it. But equally, we've been working very closely, and we had some published reports in recent months with a company called Signify, where we'd actually taken empirical soundings, if you like, as to the increase. And there is a huge amount of this sort of filth that's out there on the internet at the moment, and it isn't getting any smaller, put it that way.
I'm just looking as you were speaking, and confirmation has come in, Bobby. The police have now charged a 49-year-old Midlands man over racist abuse sent to West Brom's midfielder Roman Sawyers over social media in January, and a court date has been set for April the 29th. You know, when people read that it's been taken seriously, is this not what we want? You do this, you'll end up in a court of law.
Well, you're absolutely right, Jim, and I'm very encouraged that this case has actually got as far as court, because most of them don't. And I think really the emphasis now is on the courts to actually impose an appropriate sentence that is a deterrent, because there's no point in, putting this idiot in front of a court and he gets a slap on the wrist and then he pats his mates on the back on the way out. I think there has to be something that really sends a message to him and others that if you are indeed put before a court, you face a realistic sentence that's actually going to impinge on your lifestyle and not just a slap.
Is there a fair observation, and I don't want to be in any shape or form moving into territory of victim blaming, but the hate crime legislation in this country changed quite some time ago. So hate crime, which obviously is racist, part of it will form, racist abuse, has been around in society for some time. Isn't it in part that players and clubs haven't pushed the envelope themselves when it comes to abuse and wanting to prosecute and take these people to the letter of the law? And then, of course, you move into the sentencing guidelines, and that's a different discussion. But isn't it in part that football's now getting itself together, saying, right, OK, we're going to have the courage of our convictions, we're going to push the envelope, make sure that at least we put these people in front of the beak by going the full length?
I think you're right there, Simon, because as I'm greatly encouraged by the fact, because as you rightly say, for so long it's been the players who are basically the victims, but let's not forget that the clubs themselves have a duty of care as the employers to provide a safe environment for their employees who are the players, and that environment now does extend to the internet and social media websites as well. And I'm delighted that clubs, for me, it's wonderful. Instead of hearing players complain about it, it's great to hear people like Sam and other managers, people like Dean Smith, who are coming out and now talking in support of their players and actually saying, look, we have a duty of care to our employees, and we're happy to carry that baton, if you like. And I think we've as a game, we've come together. I mean, we have been working very closely with the Premier League, with the EFL, with the FA. We've been even numerous conversations with government and with the police. And I do think that when you get all of those forces coming together, I think we get a better and stronger way that we can actually push to get this resolved, because I'm fed up with these conversations. If I never came on and had a conversation with you two guys, not that I'm against having a conversation with you two guys at all, but this particular subject, one way or another, in one incarnation or another, I've been talking about now for 40 years.
Yes, yeah. And I totally understand that. Jamie Mackey was on Sky Sports News with me last night, and in the commercial break we were talking about this, Bobby. And we were both agreeing, what kind of mentality is it that it possesses somebody or drives somebody to go onto social media and take it out on some footballer for what reason, one reason or another, just to direct some vile bilge towards that individual? And Jamie and I were at a loss to work out why anyone would feel the need to do that. Like, what is wrong with people?
Well, neither Bobby and I can answer that question because we're not of that mindset. But you also have to understand that there's a difference between football is a culture that's built upon tribalism and abuse to some extent. But when it moves into skin colour, it becomes something different. Because if you want to give somebody some abuse because they play badly, that's one thing. If you want to give somebody some abuse because they're black, that's something completely different.
No, but Simon, here's the deal. Don't give anyone any abuse.
But football's built upon that, Jim.
I know, but we're sick of all that.
But that's
sick
but
the
whole dynamics of tribalism and the
abuse.
reasons why you've got the passion in sport.
The
reason why you've got the passion in sport and it drives the emotivity.
Passion, yes,
is because at the end of it, is at the centre of it is conflict. Is trying to overcome somebody else. Be competitive in your agenda.
Yeah.
Whether it's because you support a team, you don't see this manifesting itself in other sports the same way. That's why football is the biggest, richest sport in the world. There's an element of that behind it, but when it moves across, as Bobby will no doubt attest to, and it starts to be about not your performance, but it starts to be about your colour is the object of people's abuse, then you're moving into a territory that no one needs to be in. And you can't explain that because that's a stupid ignorance that people want to have. And there's an element of society that Bobby, again, I think will attest to. You can't eliminate those people. You can just minimise them.
Go on, Bobby.
You're absolutely right, because if you're talking about, I mean, let's face it, football supporters are drawn from society, and football does not exist within a background, within a vacuum, I beg your pardon. There will be your idiots, but at the same time, footballers, aren't these thin-skinned snowflakes. They'll take it on the chin. If they've played badly, they will accept that they will get abuse. They will accept that people might criticise their own performance. But at the same time, as you rightly say, when you're talking about, you can criticise my opinions if you like, you can criticise my point of view, but in actual fact, to criticise my ethnicity, my colour, that to me crosses a whole different boundary. Because as far as I'm concerned, a footballer should be judged on how he performs, right, good or bad, and not based on the colour of his skin. And I think that as a society, I think we've come an awful long way. And I sometimes think that football is used as a bit of a litmus test for society, and I think it's being used sometimes. And we ask a lot of ourselves as an industry.
Good point.
A lot of the time, we don't focus on a lot of the good that does get carried out within football, and there is a focus on the negative. But on something like this, we can equally take the lead. And I think if football can be seen to be taking the lead on these particular areas, I think that can only be good and better for the wider society.